Hello, everybody. This is Guy Meyer here, California Times, and I have a guest in the pod booth today, and I'm with John Turnacliff, and John is right now. You are an officer. You have become in the Republican Party. This is a Republican podcast, people. We're dealing with Republicans here in Marin County, all right, John, tell me what's going on. You are now
just recently elected, and there's a story to it, twice the chairman of the Marin County GOP. They call it the Marin County Republican Central Committee by name, but on the streets, everybody's called the Marin GOP. So I was just elected in January for the first time and in March for the second time, and that's where the story begins.
Wow. And so there is a story going on here. Not only that the Republican Party in Marin County is probably a smaller percentage Republican Party in terms of the amount of voters registered in the state of California. So you're a minority voice. So should I run the clip to begin to tell the story? You want to give me a little more background on that?
Yeah, let me give you a little more
Sure.
background. So I joined after the 2020 election, after basically sitting around for a year, kicking the dirt, and wondering what the hell I could do. Because the election, in my mind, the election was stolen and everything I saw, and I was just frustrated.
2021, you're talking about...
After the 2020 election, yeah. So
you're talking about
third quarter,
the presidential election,
yeah.
not the local
right.
Republican.
After Schultz had written a book called The Precinct Strategy about basically how to take over the committees, your political committee in your county. So I read the book, and it had some good strategies in it. And one of them is when you get in there, go in quiet, because chances are it's going to be the establishment who's running it. Then there's a fan of Trump. They're not going to like you. And I said, well, Marin's pretty laid back. I doubt that's it, but I'll go in quiet. So I went in. It was Zoom for the first few months on lockdown. And as it came out, they only had, I'm thinking like 8 or 9 people on the Zoom call, so I assume that was the size of the committee then. And then we came out of it and went to some meetings in person, and they weren't that big. Maybe some extra people showed up, and there were 15 or 20 people. And so maybe 5 or 6 months into it, I started having some legitimate questions about the finances, because they give a financial report every month. So I just asked, I don't remember what it was today, it was just almost 3 years ago at this point. And they told me I couldn't ask that question because it wasn't on the agenda, and per Robert's rules, which governs it, it has to be on the agenda. So I said, okay, I don't know Robert's rules. I got to learn Robert's rules. Afterwards, went and got long book, short book, e-book, everything on Robert's rules to figure it out. Worked with some other guys. Came back the next month to ask a similar question about the finances, and nothing earth-shattering, no breakthrough. I just had a question. And they said, we're not running these meetings based on Robert's rules, which was exactly the opposite of what they told me the month before. And at that point, I went, the light bulb went off, and I go, okay, we got a problem here. Something more is going on than I was asking innocent questions. Now it merely makes me wonder what's going on. So at that point, there was contention between the leadership back then with Jack Wilkinson and Tom Montgomery. Had been doing it for over 10 years. It was essentially their committee. And the more questions I asked, the more problems we had. And so then 2 years ago, in January of 23, I said, I'm just going to run for treasurer. They're not going to answer my questions. I'll run for treasurer, and if the long shot I win, then I'll get access. If not, I'll make the public will know something's going on. Well, the night of the election, they kicked me off the committee I had moved across the street, and they'll argue this back and forth, but I moved across the street, but the place across the street wasn't ready yet. So I had my mail transferred to St. Helena. We have a family house up there. I was going back and forth with my girlfriend across the street. And in the mail forwarding, my registration dropped. So they told me 9 months before that election night, hey, your registration's not in. What's up? And I said, I guess it's because I did mail forwarding and it got dropped. So I just went and re-registered, didn't miss an election, didn't miss anything, nobody was concerned. And for the next 9 months, I was called in roll call as a member, and they took my dues as a member up until that night of January. That night in January, they said, your registration dropped 9 months ago, you're off the committee.
But
And it's,
but they had acknowledged
yeah,
in that in between period that you had got it straightened out,
Yeah,
or they
yeah.
never acknowledged that you got it
They
straightened
knew
out.
I had it straightened out, and they called my name as a member for roll call and took my dues every month. And then they kicked me out that night. And then it's like, okay, something's really up here.
Wow.
I couldn't figure out what was going on. And over the next several months, a few more others got kicked out. So when I was out, I was getting to know other committees around the region because I figured that Republicans are outnumbered in the Bay Area for sure. Is we have to really start uniting to make our strength or our conversation worth more than just individually. So as I was meeting these other counties and other Republicans, they were saying, have you heard of this California Republican Assembly? And I said, no, I've never heard of it. They said, well, it's similar to GOP. It's not quite as structured. It's not the party, but a lot of the same people, and they're probably thinking more like you are. And so I went to a CRA meeting a couple years ago, and I walked in, about 100 people, their annual meeting, and I went, this is kind of more of the conversation I thought was going to be happening. You're talking about, policies going forward, and the way they were talking about them was more in lines with the way that I was thinking and the people I was running with versus, I'll say, an establishment or I got so much going on, working full time and et cetera. Then I thought about it more. I said, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done, and I got to do something. So we had to get together 15 Republicans minimum to be able to start a chapter, and we ended up getting 20 to get started with, and we got chartered on it's like on a Wednesday in December, and the next week we had our endorsement meeting for candidates to promote candidates. I mean, we came out of the chute strong because the people that got involved with CRA were the people that were frustrated with Marin GOP.
Well,
And
let's
wanted another outlet.
Let's just define that even more clearly for me or for anybody else. There, you have the California GOP,
Right.
Cal GOP, or
Yep.
CR, California Republican Party,
Right, both.
and then you have this other organization, the California Republican Assembly.
Which
Is
is
that
unrelated, totally, yes.
unrelated?
Similar, unrelated. They're not the party, but do a lot of the same functions as the California GOP.
And is there a is this an awkward existence between the two, or is this
only because the CRA is starting to get more their feet on the ground, or starting to get more of a grip. And the way it worked for us, I found as the way it's working around the state, is almost, I mean, for lack of a better term, like a farm league baseball team. I mean, and I don't want to say, I shouldn't say minor leagues because a lot of people in CRA are the top people in the Republican Party. But the organization, I'll say, is a good training ground to bring people in, and then they can hit the ground running when they get to GOP. At least that's the way it worked for us in Marin.
Okay. Now I interrupted you, so
That's okay.
can you continue with your point if you
Yeah, absolutely.
remember it? I think I might have lost it.
Yeah, but
So I'll just
go ahead.
push you in
Yeah.
but maybe it'll bring you
Okay.
back to wherever you were. The California Republican Assembly and the California GOP. Two separate conventions during the course of every
Yes.
2 years or 1 year?
Both of them usually have two conventions a year, a big one and a smaller one.
Okay. And you just went to a California Republican Assembly
No,
convention?
No, California GOP convention.
Oh, the California GOP convention. And this was just a few weeks ago,
yeah,
correct?
just in Sacramento,
Okay.
mid-March.
Mid-March.
And this is the one where they elect the officers at the top level. So that's why that's the big vote.
Mm-hmm.
And there are votes on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Now would be a good time to go back to what happened with the video, because what happened on the video made Little Marin County a topic of conversation at the state convention,
Oh, interesting.
which might not have ever been the case.
Oh, wow. Well, should I run the
Yeah,
at this
if you
point?
just start with the scrolling part.
Okay. All right. So we've got, the Marin GOP had some issues that made it to the state level.
Yeah.
And we have a little video here to play of that. And let me get that properly up here. All right. So we're going to scroll this and learn a little bit about what's going on here. Let's see if that is our volume. Oops. Wow. All right, I'm going to put a pause right there to digest that, try to digest that before we get into this. So
Okay.
the whole election, you were accused of running it like a riot, or it was a mob that took over?
They said so. The prior chairman starts the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
He started the meeting, and within a minute or two, he said no video. We wanted video because we had problems, as I mentioned before, from one meeting to another. The story changed. That was just the beginning of many of those things, and so we said he didn't like video. We want video for this new committee. So there's no question. And then he said no video. We said yes. He packed his bag up and left and accused us of a mob and a riot, and he felt danger. We didn't know that for 2 weeks, though. We just thought he left because he didn't want the video. He was saying to the California GOP, it was a mob, it was a riot, and I felt in danger, and I stopped the meeting. And the thing that was interesting is he had to pay. We had the check stub for the security guard that he brought himself, paid for by the committee the month before we took over. That stood in the back of the room the entire time, and when he was feeling the mob, the riot, and the danger, his private security guard never even came close to him to help. And you'll see on the video why not.
And this is all, we're about to see a video that was being shot, and that was one of the reasons why he was so upset, was that there was a video being shot?
That was the overt reason. We think he was probably trying to set something up.
All right, well, let's run the tape here and listen in.
People remember in 1995 that the county of Marin voted to have a pipeline, direct pipeline, from the Russian River to our reservoirs. Okay, now, did that ever get built? No. Jared Hoffman refused to build it. And I went to a number of meetings to get this built, and I'd stand up and say, Jared, when are you going to build it? But the bug and bunny people with their fish signs saying, you're going to kill all the fish, were at this meeting, and he listened to them. They weren't part of Marin, but he listened to them. Unfortunately, we don't have the water that we should have. Anyway, that's enough of that. So I'm happy to see all you people here. I do have a couple of things I want to say. This is a private meeting of the Marin Republican Central Committee. Now, the public is invited to attend, but we ask that you not speak out unless called upon. If you want to be called upon, please raise your hand and speak only if called upon. I hope nobody has a problem with that. And we really hope that this will stay to be a peaceful thing. There will be also no recording, video, or audio, so please turn the camera off.
No.
No. On which ground you're ordering? You're not elected.
You are not elected. Matter of fact, I want to make a point of order. Morgan, you need to move off that table. You weren't elected. Move away from the table.
Meeting is adjourned.
I make a motion to adopt.
Adjourn the meeting?
You can adjourn. I can adjourn the meeting as chair.
You already
You're not-
you come to order.
You're out of order.
I move that we elect Tom Hudson, temporary chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Tom Hudson's the temporary chair.
Okay, Tom. Meeting is not adjourned.
Wow. Right. Wow.
Okay, the first thing we need to do to get the meeting running is we need to establish who's here to make sure we have quorum. And this is of the elected members who were elected in March 5th, 2024 direct presidential primary election.
We have a quorum. This is the roll call here. We have the language.
Should I keep it going?
Is Carolyn Bednar's here? No.
Yes, yes.
Carolyn, hi, Carolyn.
Walking
We have a quorum.
I believe Frank when he tells me there's quorum because he knows all of you, but may I propose that we read off the names just so we can establish with everyone.
You see he's walking down the side
Right.
by himself. Nobody's even looking at him.
Right.
And his security guard is in the back. Let's see if he walks out with somebody.
Who were elected to serve on this committee are in the room. Jack Wilkinson. Okay, well, that's Jack here, so he's physically present. Is Tom Montgomery, I understand that he's resigned.
That
Is
was
he
security
present?
guard right there. Security guard never came front
I had heard that.
in a mob
Yeah, yeah.
for his guy. And that's it. So with that,
Wow.
the next day we took the CRA slate that ran for the committee became all the officers of the new GOP. So when I talk about farm league, kind of CRA can be, is the 5 new officers executive committee of the Marin GOP are all CRA members.
Now, at that point in time, was Jack held a position of, he was an elected leader of the Marin County Republican Party? Or?
I'd been around for 2.5 years, and he had been chairman the whole time I'd been there.
So
And
he was chairman that
yeah,
night?
Yeah. Well, he was chairman at night until he started the meeting. At that point, it's the new committee. He kind of closes the old committee, and then it's the new committee. And tradition has been he opens the meeting, but it's not his meeting as he described it.
Was there somebody else who had already been elected as chairman?
No.
then?
So then the new committee votes on a temporary chairman to do the elections. And that's where you saw Tom Hudson in there, who first started to do roll call at the end. He was our temporary chairman that we had brought in. And then in our side, we knew he was going to vote. In our side, it was 15-1 in the crowd.
Right.
Now, Jack and everybody else.
And he was asking the person who was to Jack's right there to leave the table.
Yeah, that's
because
supposed to be for officers, prior officers, and they're just up there for opening. But she wasn't a prior officer. She wasn't even on the prior committee. So it was like she wasn't supposed to be up there. Not a big deal, but a technicality is like, how far are they going to push it and nobody say anything, kind of a thing. So,
Wow.
so they decided to push it, and they were right when they pushed it.
Well, it seemed like you had a majority of the people who were there to attend felt that this was the appropriate thing to do. They continued on with the meeting, and at that point, was it a seating of people who had been elected?
So at that point, yeah, everything went on because we had practiced for this. We had a script made, so and everything pretty much except for Jack packing up and leaving. We didn't plan for that, but everything else as far as how to do the temporary chairman and then it went to a temporary. So there was more to it that's on the video. That was just the first few minutes. But at the point after he left, we elected a temporary chairman, and then the first thing done was to elect a chairman, which I won. And then I took over the meeting for the rest of the meeting, and the rest of the meeting went smoothly. One of the best meetings we've had. We were joking about it, how smoothly it went. And the next day, I had turned in our list of delegates for the state convention. We have to go to the state party. Some are automatic, like the chairman. I became automatic. The treasurer's an automatic delegate. There are 4 delegates that you get if you have your organizational meeting, as we did this one, have it in December or January. We did that. And then you can qualify for some other ones by the amount of registration you do, different benchmarks that you can earn. And we had another 3 that we earned there. So we had a total of 9. And nobody, until they get into this game, understands the value of those delegates. Because I remember when I first heard about it, it's like, oh, okay, what's the big deal? Well, all the complaining that people do and have done, including myself, about why doesn't the California GOP do this, or why do they do that? Why are the Republican candidates, I'll say in my mind, so weak at the top? All those decisions come from the people at the top of CAGOP who are voted on by the delegates. The only people that get to vote for the people making those decisions at CAGOP are the delegates I just mentioned. And there's 2 ways you can get delegates: through the committee, like I just gave that formula, and when people run for a state office, assembly, state senate, Congress, or up, those candidates, the highest finishing Republican gets X amount of delegates that they can distribute as basically it's a thank you to them for running, because it's a tough thing, and they'll usually keep one for themselves. They might get, depending on how they did, 2, 3, 4, up to 10.
Tell me again now, just as for the highest, say that
Okay.
sentence again.
So people, like including me, were wondering, where is the California GOP coming up with the ideas for these candidates, or this proposition, or backing this or that? Well, it's the people on the CAGOP board of directors. Those people get, and the officers, those people get elected by the delegates. One way to get delegates is through a central committee, like I just gave you the formula that we did. Another way to get it is if people run for office as a Republican, the highest ranking Republican in a state office, assembly, senate, or higher, gets X amount of delegates as a reward.
No matter, even if he doesn't win.
Doesn't win, doesn't have to win, but the highest ranking Republican. Because they want people in the fight, because if they don't get something, like in Marin, if they're, nobody would run for a bigger office, because it's, it's such a long shot. So to give them, an attaboy, you're going to get some extra delegates to give to your people that helped you and come make a difference at the state convention.
I'm not sure, I'm wondering if that's necessarily been a good strategy in terms of whether, because a lot of, it seems like the candidates that I've noticed who were Republican candidates over the last 10 or 20 years, and I can't remember those that go, that oftentimes seem like they're people who indeed not only have no chance, but I don't know, don't
Yeah,
seem
I've
really
had those same-
qualified,
yeah.
and they may be just the people who are full of self-promotion or self-assertion, have that quality that may be a good quality on some level, but whether they are have the judgment, maybe that's why they're only getting 20% of the vote.
Yeah.
I don't
You
know
know,
how
and
to
I
break
don't-
through that.
I've had that same thought, in prior years, and I don't know the answer because I'm just learning the formula in the last couple
Right.
of years.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it could have worked beforehand. But in the couple years I was there, it seemed like it was working well enough until all of a sudden they started, I'm going to say, stealing delegates. They took those 9 that I mentioned that we got from that meeting that night, and a week later I got a phone call or an email that said, there's been a complaint about the way you had your organizational meeting. We're going to have a hearing from the state committee on your meeting to see if it was, I'll say legal, they didn't use that word legal, viable or whatever.
Interesting, yeah.
And so we said, okay, so we put together a 75-page package of all the email correspondence we had with everybody, the agendas, the minutes. We had a rear-facing and a forward-facing 45-minute video. The rear-facing, as you saw, the crowd was just sitting there. So we didn't turn that one in because we figured it was a process. We did something Robert's Rules was wrong. We didn't know what people could complain about. And we find out that night that it was, this reminds me, the part of the video I thought was on there wasn't, was Wilkinson's talking about in the hearing it being a mob and a riot. As he's walking, as he shows the pans the room, just sitting. I got to get that video.
And when was he saying that? Not that night, but
no, that was at a hearing 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later.
Yeah, Zoom with the California GOP. They had 26 people voting because I remember they went through it and they went against us, against us, against us again. I'm going, what in the hell is going on here? We sent a video that showed everything. And you saw just a few minute video. We showed a 45-minute video.
Wow.
And one person said, I saw the video, and I didn't see anything like a mob or a riot or any danger. I didn't see anything like that. So I'm going to vote against the idea. And it just made me wonder. I mean, I'm assuming most of the people didn't watch it, or they were told what to do, one of the two, because it doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is the value of the delegates. They were doing whatever they could to squash our delegates. And so we had 9. We had the chairman and the treasurer delegate, which I got one, and Frank Driard got one. And those just automatically come with it. The rest are kind of earned or appointed to a certain person. Well, there was a vote on Friday for the Chairman's Association, which is, and And all these things don't seem like a big deal until you get inside, and then you
Right.
realize these are a big deal. So I'm talking about like it's a big deal because I've learned they are. And there's a person who is the chairman of the chairman's all the chairmen in the state, there are 50 plus, have an association within the California GOP called the Chairman's Association. There's a chairman of that association who's called the Chair of Chairs. Makes sense. Well, the prior San Francisco chairman, who did not get reelected to be to be chairman of San Francisco, was on his final couple months of being chair of chairs for the state GOP. He still held that position. So going into the convention, I heard that he was going to be running for that again, even though he wasn't a chairman. I guess in the bylaws, they don't say you have to be. Excuse me. So he was running.
Yeah.
And so when I got kicked out, and my delegate, well, all of our delegates, but mine in particular for this because I was chairman, the vote ended up being either 26 or 28, 28 to 28. It was a tie vote on the first one. Now, I had just been, had to sit in back. I couldn't sit where I was supposed to be sitting. So that's how important they knew that one vote would be. So
Tell me, say that again. Now, we're going to the scene of the vote.
Friday afternoon.
And what was this? How long
This is
ago?
this was just 2 weeks ago on Friday.
2 weeks ago on Friday.
And they're having the chairman's vote for chairman of the Chairman's Association within California GOP. And there's 50 plus chairmen for, one for every county. Not every county has one. They took the vote and ended up being 28-28, which
The vote
for chairman.
of Marin or for the
No, that
state?
was for this at the state convention.
State.
And that was the chair. All the different chairmen around the state were voting on that one.
Right.
They're in one room, voting on that. It was 28-28, but I was expelled because of our organizational meeting. They said we lost our delegates because of the mob and riot.
Oh my.
Now the first call I got after our meeting of the mob and riot was from this John Dennis running for this chairman of the Chairman's Association. I'm going, he goes, Jack Wilkinson called me. I go, why would Jack call you? Jack Wilkinson had called John Dennis, chairman of the San Francisco and chairman of the Chairman's Association, as he was walking out of the meeting. And it's like, I have no idea why. I go, John, why is he calling you? He goes, well, I'm chairman of the Chairman's Association, and this, might find its way to my desk or whatever down the road. And I'm thinking to myself, for what? Nothing happened last night. But okay, whatever. I didn't think twice about it. And then 2 weeks later, we get this, email from CAGOP saying your meeting is in conflict and we have to have a hearing on it. All to get rid of the delegates, and mine got taken out. And then first vote for his was a tie.